Hey guys, my name is Brian Skinner from secretsofsushi.com, and in this video, I'm going to show you guys how to sharpen a Yanagiba. This video is just one of a mini-series on how to sharpen sushi knives, but in this video I'm going to show you guys how to sharpen the most commonly used sushi knife, the Yanagiba. The unique thing about the Yanagiba is that it's a single beveled knife, which means that on one side it has the edge, and on the other side it's actually a little bit concave. So you guys will notice that on the back of the Yanagiba, you'll see a flat surface along the back of the knife, or the spine of the knife, as well as a flat surface that runs right along the edge. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to soak our whetstone. This is a King 1000 6000 grit whetstone that has been previously flattened and has been soaking for about 4 minutes, or just long enough to let all the air bubbles on the inside of the stone bubble up to the surface of the water. Just real quick to go over kind of my basic setup here, I have a small container of water. I've got a whetstone holder that has these rubber feet and adjustable bars, and that's what's going to hold my whetstone on top of this container of water. Then I have the actual whetstone holder that came with this King whetstone, and then I have the stone itself. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off by sharpening the flat side of the knife first in a process called the ura oshi. So I want to make sure that the whetstone has plenty of water on it, and what I'm going to do is set the knife down starting at the heel of the knife, and I'm going to lay the knife perfectly flat on the stone. Now with my right hand I'm going to hold on to the handle of the knife, and I'm going to put my finger right here in the corner of the knife, and with my left hand I'm going to apply just ever so slight amount of pressure towards the tip of the knife right here. And I'm going to keep my thumb underneath the knife so that I'm kind of clasping it like this, but making sure not to actually grab the knife itself. So for this process, you want to make sure that the knife is perfectly perpendicular towards the actual whetstone itself. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a slight amount of pressure on the knife itself when I'm pulling the knife back towards me. This is a technique that we refer to as edge trailing. So edge leading would be if the edge of the knife would be pushing forward. Edge trailing is when it's pulling back towards us. Now, edge leading and edge trailing is going to change depending on which direction the knife is facing. So if the edge is facing towards me, then pushing forward or away from my body with the edge facing towards me is edge trailing, and pulling it towards me while the edge is facing me would be edge leading. So for this particular portion of the knife sharpening technique, we're going to be applying pressure exclusively on the edge trailing movement. So when I push the knife forward using very little pressure, when I push the knife forward, there's not going to be any pressure at all. And then when I bring the knife towards me, I'm applying slight pressure with these 5 fingers. And then when I push forward again, there's no pressure, but I'm going to be moving the knife slightly. And then when I pull back towards me, applying a slight amount of pressure. Push forward and move the knife, pull it back towards you, and apply a small amount of pressure. Now as the knife moves from the heel to the tip, you want to move your thumb from underneath the knife, and at this point you're only holding on to it by the handle itself. But you're still going to be applying a slight amount of pressure during the edge trailing pull when moving the knife forward and then pulling it back. No pressure, pressure. No pressure, pressure. For this particular technique, you want to make sure that the knife itself doesn't wobble side to side. You want to make sure you have uniform pressure going forward and backwards. You want to make sure you have uniform pressure going heel to tip, not forward and backwards. You also want to make sure that you're reapplying water as often as you need to. Some whetstones that you use will require a little bit more water, and some will require a little less. You can kind of hear when you need to add a little bit more water because there's going to be more of a scratchy sound whenever you're pulling the knife towards you and when you're pushing away. So the overall goal of doing this step is to create what's called a micro burr on the edge of the knife. So if you run your finger across the edge, you should feel the metal just ever so slightly curl up a little bit. so it'll kind of grab at your fingers. And when sharpening your knife, it's less about how many strokes you do and more about whether or not the burr is being created. Remember, if you're applying pressure on the edge trailing motion, in this case when it's pulling back towards me, the edge of the knife is going to be pressed down onto the stone itself. And you're really going to be pulling the metal from the back of the knife or the spine of the knife towards the edge. If you apply pressure with the edge leading push in this example, then the knife is going to have a tendency to want to bite into the stone itself, which is going to be more damaging for the stone and is going to be counterproductive to how we're going to be sharpening the Yanagiba. So remember, it's always important that you apply pressure on the edge trailing movement, not the edge leading movement. And also, one thing to note is that since the edge of this Yanagiba is ever so slightly curved towards the tip, you want to change the angle just slightly so the edge of the knife is perpendicular with the edge of the whetstone. Now, depending on your level of comfort, there's a few different ways that you can hold or move your left hand. A lot of times people will want to slowly inch their fingers up and down the knife as they do this step. And sometimes people want to spread their fingers wide apart to make sure they have consistent pressure throughout. There's no right or wrong technique on how to hold your hand while doing this portion of the sharpening process. It's all just kind of up to you on what feels the most comfortable. An important thing to note when checking your burr is you want to make sure that it's consistent across the entire knife. If you don't feel the burr towards the tip, for example, but you do feel it kind of towards this section or towards the heel, then keep doing the uraoshi process until you feel the burr from heel to tip. Okay, so now that we have the uraoshi process complete, we're going to flip the knife over and sharpen the shinogi line. So what we're going to do is set the flat portion of that bevel onto the whetstone itself. We're going to use our thumb to apply pressure at the heel of the knife, and we're going to use our index, middle, and ring finger of our left hand to apply pressure during the portion of the knife that we want to sharpen. So remember, we're only going to apply pressure during the edge trailing stroke, not the edge leading stroke. So we're just going to push forward and apply pressure, pull back, and release that pressure. Pressure going forward, no pressure going back. Edge trailing, edge leading. And then as we move up and down the knife, you're going to slowly move your fingers up the knife. Be sure that you're reapplying water as often as necessary, which is usually indicated by a more intense scratching sound. And remember that you want to maintain this 45-degree angle. So after you've done a few passes back and forth on the knife, you want to run your fingers across the edge again to see if you can still feel that micro burr. If you can, then do a few more passes until that micro burr is no longer detectable by running your fingers across it. Okay, so now that the micro bevel has been removed from this side, we're going to go back and repeat that uraoshi technique again. So we're going to lay the knife again perfectly flat, perfectly perpendicular, and we're going to apply pressure not on the forward or edge leading push, but the edge trailing pull. Then once we feel that burr established again, we're going to flip back over and sharpen the shinogi line again. So a few things to keep in mind is that my right hand, which is holding on to the handle and just the heel of the knife itself, is what's going to be controlling the knife, moving it forward and backwards. That's the hand that controls the angle, and also make sure that the knife isn't going too far forward or too far backwards. The left hand, and for my example, I like to just use my index finger and middle finger. That's going to be controlling the amount of pressure that I'm pushing down the knife during that edge trailing movement. Or for this portion, it's going to be the push. So this is the only part that's actually applying pressure downwards other than the thumb of my right hand. After a few times of repeating that process, going from the uraoshi to the Shinobi, then you can start applying less and less pressure until you stop feeling the burr on either side, and then you start kind of jumping from one to the other in more rapid succession. Okay, so now that we've completed all of the necessary steps on the 1000 side of the stone, now we're going to flip it over and start doing the polishing portion on the 6000 grit side. So it's much the same thing. We're going to start with the Uro Oshi side, make sure we have plenty of water on our stone, and we're going to only apply pressure on the edge trailing side, pulling back towards us. And the amount of pressure that we're applying is very, very minimal. Now we're going to flip it over and do the Shinogi line, side of the knife. Okay, so after we've repeated the process, both the Uro Oshi side and the Shinogi side several times, decreasing the amount of pressure we're applying to the edge trailing movement, then we're ready to go back and create what's called a micro bevel. So using the same stone, what we're going to do is, instead of laying it perfectly flat on the Shinogi side, we're going to angle it up by just a few degrees to create a small micro bevel so that we're able to increase the rigidity of the edge and the edge retention without sacrificing so much of the sharpness of the edge. So it's theorized that the more acute the angle is to the Shinogi line, the sharper the edge will be, but you sacrifice chipping the edge of that knife and you lose a little bit of that edge retention. So to compromise, what we're going to do is create another very, very small bevel just along the very edge of the knife to increase the edge retention. So what I'm going to do is lay it perfectly flat and then ever so slightly angle the knife up just a little bit. And then we're very quickly going to push the knife up and down. And we're just going to do a single pass up and down the knife. Then we're going to go back over to our Uro Oshi side. Then we're going to go back to the Shinogi side, angle it up just slightly. And then one last time with applying very little pressure. Finally, we're going to check to make sure that there's no burr on the edge of our knife. And then we can dry our knife off. Okay, so now that we have our knife sharpened, it's fun to test the knife out on just a sheet of paper. So what I have in front of me is a sheet of printer paper, and what I'm going to do is hold the knife, and starting from the heel of the knife down to the tip, I want to hold the paper kind of flat like this, where you can kind of put your thumb in and curl it up just a little bit to make sure the edge of the paper is a little bit rigid. And what we want to do is test to see if there's any jumps from the heel of the knife up to the tip to make sure that our sharpening technique was consistent from beginning to end. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments section below. My name is Brian Skinny from secretsofsushi.com, and thank you guys for watching.